Super Lucky Disaster Man. Chapter 56, My Parallel Version. After being hit by the 10-year bazooka, Dazai Osamu didn't feel any pain whatsoever. This was within his expectations. Information regarding the Vongala family, as well as the Bovino family, which relies on the Vongala family because of their control over black technology, all lay neatly in his mind. The 10-year bazooka, this type of intel could be investigated by anyone with intent, but due to Vongala's authority, no one dared to make any moves. That little Lambo Bovino brat pulled out the bazooka, and the rest of the Vongala were all very calm. Even Sawada Tsunayoshi just had a, "this isn't very good, there are outsiders here," expression, not really afraid of being aimed at by the bazooka, and moreover, with that bizarrely and indecently pink smoke, Dazai Osamu immediately guessed it could be the 10-year bazooka, so he didn't even bother to dodge. So, what am I doing 10 years from now? Dazai Osamu muttered to himself, standing still and waiting for the pink smoke to clear, only to discover he was standing in the office of the Port Mafia boss. Dazai Osamu fell silent, momentarily so shocked that he had to steady himself against the bookshelf. Though there is indeed a possibility of something like this happening, is it true that 10 years later I'm still stuck here as a societal leech? What kind of nonsense are you talking about? Ah. Chiya's voice sounded right next to him. That disgusting pink smoke just now was the 10-year bazooka, right? Man, it's really been a long time since I've seen you like this. Dazai Osamu turned his head and sighed. So 10 years later, you're still this height? Not a single change at all, ah. The veins on Nakahara Chiya's forehead popped as he grinned viciously, cracking his knuckles. You are not the boss right now, so I have no hesitation in beating you up. The 10-year bazooka effect only lasts for 5 minutes, I need to make the most of the time. Wait, is there something wrong with the 10-year bazooka? You look only 17 or 18 years old. In this world, you're only 24. And it's not like I haven't grown taller in 10 years either. However, Dazai Osamu completely ignored Nakahara Chiya's emphasis, with all his attention focused on the first sentence. Dazai Osamu frowned and said, I am the boss right now. Am I crazy? Nakahara Chiya angrily said, I also think you're crazy. You are pretty much around this age when you took the position, yet you still haven't planned anything? Did you really suddenly decided to become the boss overnight, then stay up all night working non-stop for 4 years? Dazai Osamu suddenly said, 5 minutes should be up, right? Nakahara Chiya belatedly reacted, ah, right. Why haven't you left yet? Be polite when talking to me, you little shrimp. If we can't switch back, then I'm your boss. Dazai Osamu sat on the desk. Maybe there's an issue with the flow of time, or maybe the 10-year bazooka malfunctioned. He pondered for a few seconds, then cheerfully gave up. Anyway, the other me will definitely think of another way, whatever. Nakahara Chiya. You really won't even spare yourself. Hey, stop messing around with those documents. Don't be so stingy, it's all me anyway, let's see. Dazai Osamu casually flipped through, feeling that it was all content that didn't interest him at all. Boring. Boring, yet you did it for 4 years. Nakahara Chiya said irritably. Oh wow, you're suddenly being so polite to me, I'm really not used to it. Also, could you please not look at me with such a strange expression? I'm not dead yet, what's with that look like I'm a fossil? Ah. Dazai Osamu's tone was still as flowery as ever, with a faint smile on his face, but his eyes had already darkened. Something is off, this 10 years. No, 5 years later, something is definitely off. Judging from Nakahara Chiya's reaction, his conduct 5 years later is completely different from now. He even stays up late to work, dedicating himself wholeheartedly to the Port Mafia, practically like he's become a different person. Originating from understanding oneself, for such a situation to happen means. Dazai Osamu pulled open the desk drawer. Wait, don't just rummage around. Nakahara Chiya watched as the documents on the desk were carelessly turned over, then turned into rummaging through things. Hesitating, he wasn't sure if he should intervene. He didn't quite understand the right time to interfere, and what if whatever Dazai-Osamu found today would become an opportunity to drive a change in him? This kind of closed-loop causality, he really didn't want to get involved. Dazai-Osamu relied on his own memory, found the position in front of the bookshelf he had just arrived at, and searched for a bit, finding a slightly pulled-out document folder. He opened it, and on top was information about Oda Sakanosuke. In this world, Oda Sakanosuke works at the Armed Detective Agency and has no connection with Dazai-Osamu. What the heck, this world's me. If there are no interaction with me, then why would I pay attention to Oda Saku? Dazai-Osamu immediately thought of over a dozen possibilities in his mind, with this number increasing and decreasing as he pondered and searched for more information, until he turned to another document. The content of the document is very simple. It clearly stated that Komai de Nagi-to, this person cannot be found. If a person doesn't exist, then why would I know him and even go investigate? Dazai-Osamu calculated all kinds of possibilities of his own assumptions, erasing until he come to a conclusion. What a bother. Dazai-Osamu, feeling troubled, held the thin sheet of paper, sitting cross-legged on top of the desk, chin resting on his hand, staring at Komai de Nagi-to's name on the paper for a moment before suddenly jumping off the desk. Chiya, do I have Vangala's phone number? I do. Nakahara Chiya looked at the suddenly enthusiastic Dazai-Osamu, a bit confused. What do you want to do? See if Vangala can send me back a bit earlier. Nakahara Chiya's mouth twitched. You just said you leave it to the other one. That's because I didn't know the situation here, Dazai-Osamu said irritably. Now I know, that guy basically won't be in a hurry to return, he might even be happy about this. Because, in this world, Dazai-Osamu has nothing. Just as Dazai-Osamu thought, after boss Dazai-Osamu found that 5 minutes had passed, he wasn't in the slightest bit of urgency. No, surely it can't always be like this. Sawada Tsuneyoshi said nervously, doesn't your original world have things you need to handle personally? Leave it to the youth to handle. Dazai-Osamu, with an overly familiar attitude, said to Sawada Tsuneyoshi, no problem, Vangala. Even if it's not fix, I won't blame you. Sawada Tsuneyoshi, thank you. His hyper-intuition told him that this was the truth. Although the smile was faint, this person was probably truly happy. Dame Tsuna. After the older Dazai-Osamu left to find Komai de Nagi-to, Reborn jumped onto Sawada Tsuneyoshi's shoulder. Get rid of that expression. He just doesn't have time to bother with you right now. If you keep this up, sooner or later you'll offend someone. Sawada Tsuneyoshi hurriedly straightened his face, asking in a panic, what expression did I just make? Reborn didn't answer, but instead asked, what did you figure out? Knowing what Reborn was asking, Sawada Tsuneyoshi hesitated a little before softly saying, in his world, did Komai de Senpai die? That kind of gaze, as if seeing a beautiful illusion, didn't look like one that was viewing a living person. So pitiful, no wonder he wasn't in a hurry to leave. He must have wanted to see his living friends a bit longer. He really tried hard to imagine the feeling of having a friend die. Just thinking about it was very painful, but Sawada Tsuneyoshi felt he could continue living because he still had his family and other friends with him. If everyone supported each other, they could make it through. Perhaps it's because this friend is especially important. He could understand that there are people in this world who value emotions to such an extent, but even so, there was no need to abandon the original world directly, right? How would the friends left behind feel? Ah. Unconsciously, his gaze followed Dazai-Osamu for a while. Looking at Dazai-Osamu's pale face, and although somewhat less intense, still exuding that persistent air of listlessness, Sawada Tsuneyoshi finally came to his senses. Having such thoughts, it must be because he no longer had any attachment to the original world, right? What on earth had he gone through? Sawada Tsuneyoshi stared at him, and Dazai-Osamu tilted his head in Sawada Tsuneyoshi's direction. After discovering that the other party had shifted his gaze away in confusion, he smiled faintly, turned his head, and continued the previous topic. That's it, I'm actually a Dazai Osamu from a parallel world, and my experiences are different from the Dazai Osamu you know. Is this Hawaii? Komaeda Nagito quickly accepted the assumption of this Dazai Osamu from a parallel world and naturally continued, that's right, originally Dazai-kun was here as a representative of Tei Corporation to discuss business with Fitzgerald-san. I'm here with Kudo-kun as tourists, and we happened to meet by coincidence. Quite the luck, huh? Tei Corporation, huh? Boss Dazai Osamu fell into deep thought. He was different from this world, he had once obtained the book from the legends, and from the book, he glimpsed into the development of many parallel worlds. Parallel worlds are very strange, for example, some worlds have the Vangala family, but some do not, some worlds have the Tei Corporation, but some do not, some worlds have Komaeda Nagito. But in his world, they do not exist. What remains relatively consistent is that in almost every world, Oda Saka dies. He observed countless parallel worlds, and there was only one world where Oda Saka was saved, which was the world where he and Komaeda Nagito knew each other. He had searched all over his world but couldn't find Komaeda Nagito, so he had no choice but to eliminate all other failed options and use his own methods to try to save Oda Saka. Thus, he became the boss of Port Mafia, and ended up as a stranger to Oda Saka. He had just met Oda Saka, that friend of his from other worlds, had pointed a gun at him, so he felt that right now, even going to die wouldn't matter. He left that place which had never been his and his friends' gathering spot, the Lupin Bar, and returned to the Port Mafia's building. He intended to settle some matters with Nakahara Chiya about the Port Mafia, to keep him busy, and then destroy some unnecessary information that others didn't need to know. After that, he could go to the rooftop, waiting for the final end of the 4.5-year plan. But just as he was about to take out the records to destroy them, he suddenly found himself sent to this world by the effect of the 10-year bazooka. Since he felt that 10 years later he would definitely be dead, he never tried to discuss the 10-year bazooka with Vangala. Unexpectedly, he suddenly ended up in the parallel world's past at such a time. It really was like a dying wish, wasn't it? Dazai Osamu thought mockingly to himself, his eyes greedily fixed on this usual attitude of friend. In your world, did Oda-san not publish? I actually brought a copy with me, as it's really suitable for repeated reading. Wait a moment. The friend he had never met before is discussing about Oda Saka with him in such a calm demeanor. This scenario was something he dared not dream of even in his sleep. Komaeda Nagito pulled his backpack closer, rummaged through it for a bit, and took out a book to give to Dazai Osamu. Since I thought of reading it during a break, I brought it along. You haven't seen it yet, so I'm giving it to you. Ha, even someone as useless as me can be of help in times like this. Komaeda-kun is really interesting. Dazai Osamu spoke to Komaeda Nagito without any trace of conflict in his tone, even a bit sentimental. He eagerly took the book and glanced at it. Moonlight, huh? He gently touched the cover, turned to the inner page, and found a signature on it. To my friend, Oda Sakanosuke. Dazai Osamu paused for a moment. Did you really want to give this to me? Of course, I believe that if Oda-san knew, he would definitely agree with me. Komaeda Nagito smiled, waving his hand. Perhaps this book was always meant to belong to you. Oda-san gave it to me for this very moment, so that I could help you in your urgency. Wow, thinking of it like that, I feel truly honored. Dazai Osamu laughed. Although this was his first time truly meeting Komaeda Nagito, it was clear he had already understood well the way to get along with Komaeda Nagito. Well, thank you, and thank you for the trouble of bringing this from Oda Saka to me. Being able to help makes me really happy. Let me ask a quick question. Komaeda Nagito, with his naturally sharp instincts, asked, were you trying to kill yourself again earlier? You found out? Dazai Osamu nodded, not denying it, and even lifted the corner of his mouth into a faint smile. Unlike what you know about me, this time, it's truly the last one. Komaeda Nagito immediately asked in an excited tone, did you find the answer? I did. Dazai Osamu, pale and frail as if he were a paper cutout, said gently. Now, I can die without regrets. Using Komaeda-kun's words, I chose death for hope. You are truly amazing, Dazai-kun. Komaeda Nagito exclaimed joyfully, holding Dazai-Osamu's right hand with both of his. Congratulations. Although I couldn't witness that spectacular scene, I will always cheer for you in my heart, Dazai-kun. I really hope that I, too, can become a symbol of hope one day. Hearing this news, today is truly my lucky day. Dazai-Osamu stared at his hand, which was being held, for a few seconds before slowly clasping it back, his gaze gradually moving upwards to Komaeda Nagito's face. Komaeda Nagito's intense and focused gaze contrasted with the cold and unfamiliar look Oda Saku had given not long ago. Komaeda-kun. His tone carried a barely perceptible tremor, his gaze tinged with a hint of unstable nervousness. If you still think of becoming a stepping stone for hope someday, even at the cost of your own life, would you be willing to die with me in a double suicide? Wait. I've held back for a long time. Were you joking just now? Kudo Shinichi interrupted furiously, inciting someone to commit suicide is a crime, you know. Dazai-Osamu looked at Kudo Shinichi. Are you talking to me about crime? Kudo Shinichi. Right, this is a genuine mafia member. However, Kudo Shinichi was a bit troubled, but still firmly stood by his friend Komaeda Nagito's side. Komaeda-senpai is my friend, I can't just sit idly by after what was said earlier. Is that really what you should say to a friend? Saying someone should die? No, wait. Can't you just not commit suicide? Dazai-Osamu calmly said, even without me, Komaeda-kun would still go seek death for some other irrational reason of his, so it might as well be with me. I just suddenly remembered that all these years I haven't been able to find a partner to die with, and had to jump alone, which was indeed a bit regretful. If it's Komaeda-kun, maybe he'd be willing to leave me with no regrets. Kudo Shinichi, who cherishes life, growled, what kind of joke is this? I'm just joking. Dazai-Osamu suddenly changed his tone, inviting others to die with me is just my personal preference. Kudo Shinichi looked at him skeptically, feeling that if Komaeda-senpai had agreed just now, Dazai-Osamu definitely wouldn't have said it was a joke, but instead would have immediately dragged him off to try dying together. Don't look at me like that, even if I wanted to die, I would definitely do it in my own world. Komaeda-kun can't come back there with me. Dazai-Osamu said calmly, so, it really was just a joke, are you satisfied now? Can I continue talking with Komaeda-kun? Kudo Shinichi still felt something was off, but the logic flowed well enough that he couldn't find a reason to argue. Fine, as long as senpai isn't wavering, it's fine. Moreover, he also felt. If Dazai-Osamu was truly planning to return just to die, he shouldn't disturb the other party's conversation with his senpai. He could probably investigate the subtle reason behind Dazai-Osamu's attitude toward his senpai. But if it wasn't for Dazai-Osamu suddenly inviting his senpai to die together, he wouldn't have planned to speak in the first place. Although still a bit worried, seeing Dazai-Osamu's pale, weakened appearance, Kudo Shinichi decided to walk away and no longer disturb them. It felt like this person was practically no different from someone already dead. It was only upon meeting Komaeda-senpai that he seemed to reflect a glimmer of vitality. Kudo Shinichi interrupted briefly, causing Dazai-Osamu to be unable to hear Komaeda Nagito's answer, leaving him with some regret. However, having missed that atmosphere, he didn't intend to ask again. Perhaps, not getting the answer was also a kind of luck. Komaeda-kun. Dazai-Osamu interrupted Komaeda Nagito, who seemed to still be pondering the previous question. Tell me more about Oda Saku. Ah, alright. Komaeda Nagito returned to his senses. Oda-san said he's actually been considering resigning next year if his royalties stabilize, but he's really worried that the port mafia won't let him go and such. Dazai-Osamu listened quietly, his gaze fixed intently on Komaeda Nagito, his eyes soft and gentle, until Komaeda Nagito finished speaking, at which point he mumbled softly. I wonder what Oda Saku would say if you were here right now. Komaeda Nagito naturally continued, we talked about this topic before, you know. Oda-san said, although he didn't say it outright, in truth, he didn't approve of Dazai-kun committing suicide. Huh? Dazai-Osamu's eyes widened. You guys would discuss this kind of topic? Komaeda Nagito sighed. Yes, because I wanted to accompany Oda-san in seeking inspiration. Moreover, Oda-san has always been quite conflicted about the ending of that book. There was just so much discussion about life. Dazai-Osamu asked with interest, what kind of book? Sorry, I only have this book with me, but it roughly says, Komaeda Nagito thought for a moment, even if you can't find the answer, existence at least still has hope, and maybe something good will happen. The sound of his voice had yet to fade when a pink mist suddenly exploded before him. After a few coughs, the smoke dissipated, revealing that familiar Dazai-Osamu had returned. Ah, faster than I imagined. 17-year-old Dazai-Osamu waved his hand, forcing the lingering smoke to disperse, then glanced at Komaeda Nagito. I just knew. What were you all talking about earlier? Well, that Dazai-kun said he found the answer, and he was coming back to commit suicide, and then there was some more talk about Oda-san. Dazai-Osamu's expression soured, as though he wanted to say something, but after thinking it over, he kept his mouth shut. Oh, and he also invited me to a double suicide, but I didn't get the chance to. Hey, you! Dazai-Osamu, rarely showing his emotions, displayed an angry expression. What is it, huh? You don't have it yourself, so you steal from others. Isn't it me and Komaeda-kun who are friends? This time getting hit by the 10-year bazooka, it's because Komaeda-kun considers me a friend, right? Komaeda Nagito did not immediately deny it as he used to, but instead fell into doubt because of those words. Ah. Dazai-kun, to him, had already become so important that it could be the price of misfortune? How strange, he didn't have that feeling at all. It seemed as if Komaeda Nagito's thoughts could be heard, as Dazai-Osamu's voice rang out just in time. Although Komaeda-kun always feels differently, it's true that people find it inherently difficult to understand themselves, isn't that so? Having attributed this incident to his own fault, upon hearing these words, Komaeda Nagito couldn't help but feel there was some truth in it. So, in fact, he had already considered Dazai-kun a friend long ago, but due to various reasons, hadn't realized it himself. However, if that's the case, Dazai-kun, is because of me that you experienced misfortune. It seems like you don't care at all, do you? Komaeda Nagito said wistfully. I've said it before. Knowing full well that Komaeda Nagito actually didn't consider him a friend, Dazai-Osamu still guided Komaeda Nagito to think in this direction. I look forward to all the misfortune you'll bring. Chapter 56 End. Chapter 57, That Works. Boss Dazai-Osamu returned to his own world, looked at the chaotic office, and fell into contemplation. Nakahara Chiya's attitude became a bit more respectful than before, but his words were still far from polite. This is your other self's doing, I don't know if I should stop it. Dazai-Osamu sat in his chair, flipped through some documents. You may go. Nakahara Chiya frowned. You still haven't told me why you called me here. Nothing important. Dazai-Osamu rested his chin on his hand, showing a thin smile that hadn't appeared for over 4 years. I just have a new idea. Nakahara Chiya stared at him for a few seconds. Never mind. It feels like after the 10-year bazooka, the air around him changes entirely, and even the dense aura of death dissipates slightly compares to before he was summoned. Had he found a new goal to survive? 4.5 years ago, there was a sudden shift in his style of action, a kind of attitude that burns one's life force. Recently, he felt that the other party seemed to be burning to the last ember, and calling him over was likely not good news. Unexpectedly, an unforeseen breakthrough happened, and it felt as if he had been reignited once more. Once again, the flame was just an unsteady flicker of a candle, likely to extinguish at any moment. However, as long as there wasn't a decision to take that one step, there should still be a chance to save it. Next, probably Akutagawa. Someone will come rushing in, you don't need to get involved, let Atsushi-kun handle it. Nakahara Chiya left. Dazai-Osamu sat on the chair, flipping through a book leisurely, then casually swept the chaotic pile of documents on the table aside. leaving space for the book. Just then, the phone rang. Dazai-Osamu glanced at the caller ID, then answered, Vangala. Dazai-san. The 19-year-old Vangala Decimo spoke from the other end, his attitude much stronger than when he was a child as he asked, have you already returned? Dazai-Osamu immediately understood, the young version of me gave you a call? That's right. Sawada Tsunayoshi let out a sigh of relief, he was still complaining about how things were unstable. Since you've returned, the issue is resolved. Don't hang up yet, Vangala. Dazai-Osamu said, as a victim of the 10-year bazooka, I have a few questions to ask. In the past, he heard about the 10-year bazooka effect, thinking that exchanging information with his future self 10 years later was meaningless. He had already grown weary of everything because he could see the ending at a glance. Moreover, possessing the book of this matter had made him see enough of his various futures, and he thought there was no need to learn anything from 10 years later just to save Oda-saku. But this time, unexpectedly getting hit by the effect allowed Dazai-Osamu to realize that the 10-year bazooka was not just an empty name, it wasn't merely a tool for exchanging information with his future self 10 years later, but it could actually allow him to enter a parallel world. Originally, he thought he could only see it in the book, and back in reality, all he faced was Oda-saku's hostility and confusion. But this time made him realize, in truth, there were other ways. If there is a next time, not just in Hawaii, perhaps he might not only see Komai Dakuen again, but also see a different world of Oda-saku. He might even join Komai Dakuen and Oda-saku in their discussions. He originally thought that seeing Komai Dakuen would be enough for him to feel content before seeking death, but now he realized that humans are indeed greedy, and he was no exception. This kind of feeling, of having an empty hole in his chest gradually filled, once experienced, makes one want the next time. Right now, he's talking about seeking death, but as expected, he still can't quite accept it. Earlier, it was because he felt that the plan had gone well enough, and he originally had the idea of dying in his heart. Oda-saku's attitude merely added more weight to it. Now that the sense of hopelessness has passed, Dazai-Osamu's relentless mindset to achieve his goal by any means necessary has once again taken the upper hand. Dazai-Osamu wishes beautiful. He went to another world to enjoy himself a bit, because he abandoned the friendship with Oda-saku to save him. He made his counterpart from another world face Oda-saku from his world, so everyone could share the pain, and then wait for Oda-saku to accept the parallel theory. After that, he would return, and the world will immediately become better. After hanging up the Vangala phone, Dazai-Osamu picked up the documents about Komaeda Nagito and Oda-saku that had been casually stuffed into the drawer by his counterpart, and unconsciously smiled a bit. As expected, perhaps existence can bring about something good. When will it be next time, I wonder? In another world, under his guidance, Komaeda Nagito finally admitted that he was the friend of Dazai-Osamu, ultimately taking a difficult small step forward. Komaeda Nagito's suicidal tendency is like fire, his emotions radiate outward, and for an ideal, he is willing to burn himself like a martyr, grand and intense. Dazai-Osamu's suicidal tendency, on the other hand, is like water, his emotions are more inward-facing, gradually taking his life from within, as if sinking into the cold depths of the ocean, calmly and rationally watching himself perish. They are similar, but in reality, there are significant differences between them. However, because of their similarities, the differences are also highlighted more distinctly. Dazai-Osamu realized this right from the beginning. After overcoming this point of conflict, he was willing to put in a bit more genuine effort towards Komaeda Nagito. But Komaeda Nagito never could understand this, and he subconsciously continued to maintain a distance from Dazai-Osamu. It wasn't until this time when Dazai-Osamu deliberately guided him that he was finally willing, due to a misunderstanding, to overlook that subtle conflict. Although Dazai-Osamu's methods were somewhat deceitful, it was merely to simplify a long-winded process, allowing Komaeda Nagito to face himself a bit sooner. He didn't feel guilty at all, instead, he even felt a sense of satisfaction. Compared to another version of himself in a different world, he really was a winner in life. Although they were both himself, when he saw the other version in such a miserable state, he felt nothing like the sympathy of a rabbit for a dying fox. Instead, he felt incredibly fortunate that he himself wasn't that unlucky. If he had to put it into words, it was roughly that he had become wary of another version of himself, afraid that the other might lose control of his mindset due to the disparity and start desiring something that didn't belong to him. You actually gave him Oda Saku's book. Dazai Osamu was still chatting with Komai de Nagito and showing his dissatisfaction. Honestly, Oda Saku only signed 3 copies, and you gave him one of them. What else? What else did he say? There's really nothing. Komai de Nagito spoke, his mouth dry, unable to help but say, I already said it 3 times from the start, Dazai-kun clearly doesn't trust my judgment enough. I'm really sorry, but I had no other choice. Or perhaps Dazai-kun can find an ability user who can retrieve memories to let you see mine. Dazai Osamu, unfazed by the jab, replied, Of course I trust you, Komai de-kun. Here, have some water. Komai de Nagito accepted the bottle of water that Dazai Osamu had opened, taking a few gulps to ease his throat. Kudo Shinichi had just returned from swimming in the sea, drying his hair with a towel as he asked, Done talking yet? Want to go swimming? What about volleyball? A day ago, Kudo Shinichi was still a staunch materialist warrior, but now he believed that there truly were abilities in this world. Those people were definitely using abilities to play volleyball on the beach. He definitely wasn't going to risk his life there. Ah, yes, if we're at the beach, of course we should go play in the sea, right? Komai de Nagito, after drinking some water, regained his energy. I hope I don't get stung by a jellyfish, pinched by a crab, or tangled up in seaweed. Ha ha ha, I was just casually saying it, seems a bit of a downer, huh? Kudo Shinichi's face was full of words that couldn't be expressed. Senpai, did you often encounter things like that before? It's not really that often, but I haven't gone to the beach too many times, Komai de Nagito recalled. Speaking of which, the last time I went to the beach was during that case on Reigo Island. Unfortunately, we were in a hurry to investigate, and I was turned into a cat, so I didn't even have time to enjoy the sea. Turned into a cat. Kudo Shinichi couldn't help but confirm, did I hear that wrong? Do you mean the kind of turned into a cat I'm thinking? Yeah. The one who answered him wasn't Komai de Nagito but Dazai Osamu. I even took a few photos of Komai de-kun as a cat. But I won't let you see them. Kudo Shinichi squinted at Dazai Osamu. Dazai-san, how old are you this year? Could you not be so immature? Komai de senpai is much more mature than you. Acting like this, how can you be in the underworld? In the end, the 3 of them harmoniously went to the seawater area that almost reached their thighs and played for a bit, while Dazai Osamu also demonstrated some, how to pretend to be a drowning corpse, skills. What use are skills like that? Ah! Kudo Shinichi shouted, his voice echoing across the entire stretch of the sea. Of course, it's useful. Dazai Osamu straightened his body once more and said, for example, there seemed to be a corpse over there. I can tell it's not pretending. Kudo Shinichi turned his head sharply. In the end, today didn't go well. Kudo Shinichi made it ashore to report the emergency, and the police quickly came. Moreover, they expressed suspicion towards the entire Italian long-established Mafia Vongola family. Obviously, it's not them. Ah. Kudo Shinichi seemed anxious. Which criminal is that arrogant, anyway? Besides, they basically don't know each other at all. What's wrong with the American police? Kudo Shinichi really wanted to take a look at the body, but normally police wouldn't allow a 14-year-old foreigner to approach a corpse, so the information Kudo Shinichi obtained wasn't much, and he could only be stopped outside like an ordinary person. Ah, no, that's wrong. Kudo Shinichi, as the closest witness, was immediately called aside by the police for questioning. He cooperated and told the police everything he knew, though of course, whatever the police learned, they wouldn't share with him. Kudo Shinichi was quite frustrated. Dazai Osamu and Komai de Nagito were also questioned, and after their information matched with Kudo Shinichi's, they were released. By the way, Dazai Osamu used his identity as a consultant for Tei Corporation to leave the country, unlike Vongola, which made such an obvious and conspicuous appearance, so he successfully got treated as an ordinary passerby and was let go. Kudo Shinichi, although he had just met the Vongala members and didn't entirely grasp what the Vongala family truly represented, trusted his own eyes. This so-called heir to the mafia family, Sawada Tsunayoshi, appeared far more innocent than the self-proclaimed ordinary consultant, Dazai Osamu. In fact, many of the so-called members were around his own age, with some even being young children. Perhaps they might kill people in the future, but at least for now, Kudo Shinichi felt that innocent people were just that, innocent. Unfortunately, he didn't have the authority to help prove their innocence. Komaeda Nagito remained indifferent and aloof for a moment, then said coldly to Kudo Shinichi, "So, Kudo-kun needs to hurry up and become a great detective, otherwise the police won't listen to you." Kudo Shinichi responded reluctantly, "If it were my father." Kudo Yusaku, despite being in America, was unexpectedly famous, and even Yukiko was well known as the Night Baroness. Only Kudo Shinichi's words were entirely ineffective. As he spoke, he instinctively looked up to find his mother, noticing her just ending a phone call and heading toward them. "Your dad said, there's too little information, can't determine the perpetrator, but he can roughly guess who. This should be the recent serial killer case in the United States. I should remind the police to contact the FBI, they're investigating this case. If the FBI is in charge of the case, then the chance for Kudo Shinichi to get involved would be even smaller." Kudo Shinichi sighed in frustration. Dazai Osamu, who had gone out for a stroll at some point, returned and said, "Seems like there's nothing to do today, shall we head back to the hotel?" Even if he hadn't said that, everyone would have had to return to the hotel. The police also left them with contact information, suggesting that they go back. After all, they couldn't wait until the case was solved to leave, could they? Who knows how long that might take. After returning to the hotel, they realized that the atmosphere there had changed as well. After all, many tourists had booked this hotel, and it was impossible for the occurrence of a murder case not to affect them at all. Kudo Shinichi hurried back to his room to discuss today's case with his father, quickly saying his goodbyes before leaving. Meanwhile, Komaeda Nagito and Dazai Osamu returned to their room together to rest for a while. Dazai Osamu, after finishing his bath, came out at the time when Komaeda Nagito was sending news to Little Raccoon. He briefly mentioned the case he encountered to Little Raccoon, who unreservedly criticized with a laugh, "We know this person, his method of committing crimes is really crude, the police are too stupid." Komaeda Nagito didn't take the evaluation from someone who is good at writing detective novels to heart. After all, compared to meticulously designed locked-room murder cases and other intricate plans, most cases probably seemed quite crude in Little Raccoon's eyes. Komaeda Nagito, "We're back at the hotel now." Little Raccoon, "He's probably still at the hotel." According to past habits, he would want to kill the dead person's boyfriend next before leaving. The body being found at sea so soon was unexpected. If he moved fast enough, the police wouldn't have arrived before he finished killing the boyfriend. This mishap exposed him prematurely, and now his next actions will be more rushed. He wants to finish before the FBI catches up. Dazai Osamu leaned over to glance at Komaeda Nagito's screen, raising an eyebrow. "Who's this now?" "A mystery novelist." Dazai Osamu read the contact's name, Little Raccoon. He remembers, Komaeda Nagito had mentioned an online detective novel author pen pal in America, and indeed it seemed like that person is a bit smart. Komaeda-kun unexpected had a lot of friends, huh? Komaeda Nagito paused his typing, thought for a moment, and replied, "No, he's not a friend, just someone I know. I don't even have the qualifications to become his friend. Probably only a renowned detective like Edogawa Ranpo could become his friend." If Komaeda Nagito purposely mentioned Edogawa Ranpo instead of the nearby Kudo Yusaku, Dazai Osamu naturally understood that this Little Raccoon might have some sort of connection with Edogawa Ranpo. Edogawa Ranpo's name was something Dazai Osamu had heard of as well. After all, the armed detective agency is relatively similar to the Port Mafia. Although there wasn't much direct conflict between them, because Mori Ogai had taken notice, Dazai had also reviewed some of their intel. Edogawa Ranpo has never left the country, although he is very famous locally. It shouldn't be to the extent that a detective novelist across the ocean would know him. So, did this little raccoon visit Japan, even Yokohama, and have a duel with Edogawa Ranpo? Dazai Osamu had nearly uncovered all of Little Raccoon's secrets just from Komaeda Nagito's mention of Edogawa Ranpo. But to him, it was simply a matter of logic. Once the conclusion was reached, he tossed it aside. What did he write? Komaeda Nagito said sadly, I need to use a computer now. But I've already shared a copy with Kudo-kun. If you want to see it, you can ask Kudo-kun. Dazai Osamu. Or Oda-san, I also sent him, but sometimes there may be inconvenient parts. Dazai Osamu. He felt left out. Who else did you give it to? Dazai Osamu couldn't help but ask, let me think, Kudo Yusaku. Kudo-kun said he wanted to show it to Yusaku-san, and Little Raccoon-san said it was fine to spread it within a small range, so he agreed. After that, it was Ayatsuji Yukido-sensei, and there were no others. Dazai Osamu calmly thought about it. After all, they were all people he knew, which suggested that Komaeda-kun's social circle hadn't gone beyond what he was aware of, which could count as useful information, right? Later that evening, when they received a message from Kudo Yukiko to have dinner at the hotel restaurant, Komaeda Nagito looked at the waiter who was serving the food and stared at him unusually for 2 seconds before looking away. Dazai Osamu sighed upon seeing the scene. I thought Komaeda-kun's social relations were quite simple. Was that the FBI just now? You even knows the FBI? Kudo Shinichi, who had been talking with Mori Rang, was startled and turned his head to ask, FBI? Kudo Yusaku, who had also been speaking with his wife earlier and hadn't noticed the person serving the dishes, now heard Dazai Osamu's speculation and said, Shinichi, calm down a bit, don't let them be exposed. They're probably looking for the suspicious person. The FBI hasn't been mentioned in the news, but now the FBI appears, which means they probably guessed the criminal's movement trajectory, but haven't identified the individual yet. Therefore, they don't want to alert anyone and can only inconspicuously search the area for any suspicious people. Komaeda Nagito isn't really sure. Dazai-kun's reasoning is that this case involves the FBI, so he inferred the other person's identity based on some special physical characteristics, right? But if he's not mistaken, this one called Akai Shuichi from the FBI should currently be undercover at that liquor factory organization. So, is this ultimately an FBI mission or an organization mission? The answer didn't take long to be exposed. As Komaeda Nagito and the others finished their dinner and left the dining hall, on their way back to their rooms, a strange noise suddenly came from the public toilet nearby. Right after that, a figure rushed out and grabbed the closest person, Komaeda Nagito. Don't move. The person pointed a gun at Komaeda Nagito's temple, or I'll kill him. A moment later, another figure stepped out of the public toilet, a large, somewhat simple-looking man. He looked apologetically at Akai Shuichi, who had rushed over from around the corner, and said, Sorry, Akai-san, I've been found. Akai Shuichi held his forehead. They deliberately set the ambush at a location with not many people, the restroom, precisely to avoid situations like this and prevent causing a commotion among the crowd. Yet, this still got exposed. Could it be that the FBI's acting skills standard is really that low? He looked toward the hostage and realized it was someone he knew, a boy he had seen before on the rooftop, who seemed to know bourbon. He hadn't expected to see him here in America, let alone in such a situation as a hostage. The good news was that this hostage didn't seem nervous at all, so they wouldn't become a burden when they figured out a way to rescue him. Hopefully, he could maintain this calmness throughout. Quite a lot of accidents, Komaeda-kun. Dazai Osamu remarked with a sigh, your shoelace really comes undone at the worst times. Indeed, Komaeda Nagito actually had enough time to dodge this unexpected situation, but because his shoelace suddenly came undone, and he squatted down to tie it, he lost the chance to counter. Since Dazai Osamu knew too much about Komaeda Nagito's background, and was aware of the fates of those who had kidnapped him, he wasn't particularly worried. The Kudo family and Mori Rang, who were nearby, were kindly asked by the FBI to stay away. Initially, they also wanted Dazai Osamu to move back, but the remaining FBI agents hadn't yet approached before they were threatened and pushed back by the criminal. You move back too. The criminal said to Dazai-Osamu. Dazai-Osamu pondered for a few seconds. It might not be too appropriate for me to say this, but that revolver caliber you're holding isn't really suitable for this kind of action. When you press the trigger, the casing could hit you in the eye. The criminal was stunned, then immediately became enraged. Shut up. It's none of your business. As the criminal wavered, Dazai-Osamu squinted his eyes, stealthily took a step forward, but was pulled back by an FBI who thought he was a weak, pitiful, and helpless bystander. It's dangerous, don't get any closer. Missing a good opportunity, Dazai-Osamu sighed inwardly, but he didn't seem to mind much. In fact, he was even looking forward to Komaeda Nagito's reaction. Dazai-Osamu looked on expectantly, while Komaeda Nagito gave his opinion. Could you maybe loosen up a bit? I feel like it's a little hard to breathe. Shut up. Shut up, shut up. Feeling even his hostage despised him, the criminal's emotions grew more agitated. He nervously eyed the approaching FBI group. Though it was only 5 or 6 individuals, it still kept him on edge. In this situation, the chance of breaking through is very low, and there's a risk of being ambushed, so he took step by step to retreat toward the corridor on the other side of the patio. The open space on 3 sides made him relax a little, and he felt that this way he could only deal with it head-on. This is a foreigner, you all should think carefully before playing that scenario of taking out the hostage without having a hostage. The FBI group's expressions were tense. Indeed, as it was an international friend, they couldn't act too crudely. At the very least, they had to put on an effort. Calm down a bit. Do you have any demands? You can tell us now. The perpetrator sneered coldly. I want. At this very moment, everyone watched in astonishment as something suddenly fell from above, perfectly landing on the head of the criminal standing on the patio. For a moment, it seemed like everyone had stopped breathing, and only Dazai-Osamu let out a wow in admiration. Under everyone's shocked gaze, the criminal maintained a bewildered expression, rolled his eyes, and fell backward. Seeing such a scene, everyone sighed in relief. They hadn't expected that a serial killer could be dealt with so easily. Just as they were about to move forward to finish things off, another unexpected incident occurred. The criminal only fell when he touched the handrail in the patio. The handrail seemed to have no safety function at all, directly detaching from its fixed point and falling away. The criminal, who had already lost consciousness, also tumbled outward. Everything happened too quickly, almost simultaneously. In fact, as he was falling, he even grabbed Komaeda Nagito's neck, causing Komaeda Nagito to lose his balance as well. Unable to escape in time, they both fell together, and the next moment screams echoed from downstairs. Komaeda-kun. Dazai-Osamu's expression finally changed. He pushed aside the FBI agent in front of him, rushed to the edge of the balcony, and looked down. Upon realizing the ground was closer than he imagined, he let out a sigh of relief. This was only the 3rd floor. There was someone cushioning the fall, right? It should be, alright, shouldn't it? Chapter 57 End. Chapter 58 Family Sequelae. With a height of 3 stories, if not for head down first, the survival rate would actually be quite high. However, this survival rate only takes responsibility for life and death, not for other parts. Therefore, it is fairly normal for some minor ailments to arise in other aspects. Probably because it's too close to the beach, accidents happen quite frequently. The hotel itself has its own doctor, and when the FBI came, they also brought their own doctor along. Even if there was no doctor, many of the FBI agents actually knew a bit about basic medical treatment, though their professionalism wasn't quite up to par. Summarizing, after the incident occurred, the doctors group quickly rushed over to conduct examinations and provide emergency treatment. The culprit was in shock, had multiple bone fractures, extensive internal bleeding, and a hole in the head, while Komaeda Nagito, having been cushioned by someone's body, appeared to be in much better condition compared to the culprit, but he also had several fractures and was unconscious. It might be a concussion. The FBI's doctor provided emergency treatment for the 2 of them and soon had them both sent off in an ambulance. Where are the family members? Just as Kudo Shinichi was about to speak, Dazai Osamu raised his hand. Me. The doctor's gaze first stopped on Dazai Osamu's face, then instinctively scanned over the areas on Dazai Osamu's body that were covered with bandages, revealing a subtle expression. There's still space, get in. Dazai Osamu decisively followed the ambulance, and Kudo Shinichi immediately turned to Kudo Yusaku. Dad. There's no need for you to add more trouble right now, Kudo Yusaku said calmly. I'll take you to the hospital to see your senpai later. Kudo Shinichi actually understood this reasoning as well. After calming down his mind a little, he reluctantly agreed and obediently kept his mouth shut. Kudo Yusaku stays to talk with the FBI. Among them, one of them considered Kudo Yusaku to be quite a renowned author in the United States, so he simply answered a few questions, and then actually started inquiring for information. That kid who fell, did he come with you? And what is the identity of his family, do you know? At first, he thought that black-haired teenager was just an innocent bystander, holding him back from getting involved. But when the hostage fell off the balcony, in that instant, the black-haired teenager exuded a murderous aura, which even made this well-experienced FBI agent surprised, almost instinctively wanting to subdue him. They knows the Kudo family of 3. That little girl was standing like she was another boy's girlfriend, falling behind the other 2. It felt like the level of familiarity between her and the Kudo family was a bit different. Kudo Yusaku explained a little, the one who fell is my son's friend. As for his family member. This term that Kudo Yusaku used was really awkward, but they currently didn't know Dazai Osamu's full name, so using this kind of pronoun was the best choice. For the sake of conversational efficiency, it's better not to get too hung up on the awkwardness. Is an overseas business executive. Kudo Yusaku carefully found a reliable introduction, as it wouldn't be appropriate to directly say that the person was a mafia executive. However, he also understood what the FBI was suspecting, so Kudo Yusaku tried to get closer and added, but he does have some connections with that Italian Vongola family. The FBI was shocked. Wow, someone so young is an executive. Is that even legal? Kudo Yusaku gave a subtle smile. You don't want to answer my questions, so don't expect me to provide free information either. A bit is enough. His willingness to respond earlier was simply because he didn't want the FBI's suspicions of Dazai Osamu to grow out of control. The FBI wisely did not press further, and though the criminal was caught, it did not mean they could rest. There were still many tasks to be done, so they had to hurriedly take their leave. Their ace, FBI Akai Shuichi, also went to the hospital. Initially, after completing the mission, such a small matter could have been left to others, but Akai Shuichi, for some reason, decided to go personally. Was it just a spur of the moment? It's said that Akai Shuichi might have Japanese heritage, perhaps he was concerned for the hostage. Originally, someone was supposed to be in charge of keeping an eye on the criminal to prevent any unexpected incidents. In the past, there were instances where even leg-amputated criminals could still kidnap medical staff. It didn't matter who went, Akai Shuichi going wasn't against the rules. Because he casually enters the ambulance, no one reacted that it wasn't supposed to be Akai Shuichi's job. At this moment, he was standing with Dazai Osamu in the hospital hallway, waiting for the examination inside to finish. Dazai Osamu was just moved down from the ambulance, and there were still people who thought he was severely injured. They tried to remove his bandages to check again, but only after Dazai Osamu explained that he was fine did they let him go. In short, Dazai Osamu stood here as a family member. As for why Akai Shuichi was also here, it was quite simple, he was trying to sell favors to the Japanese police. He knows Komaeda Nagito, towards this teenager who barged into the scene of Scotch's suicide on the rooftop, and also coincidentally knows Bourbon, he can be said to have a deeply ingrained impression. Once was already too much, but then he received a mission from the organization, asking him to go to a house to retrieve a chip hidden by a traitor. The information even included Komaeda Nagito's name. Akai Shuichi couldn't help but remark on how small Japan really was. It was uncertain whether it was due to the failure of the mission, or because that hidden chip might have left behind some clues, but the organization seemed to have discovered that the FBI had placed quite a few infiltrators within it. They launched an all-out investigation into the FBI. He was unfortunately exposed and had no choice but to return to the main headquarters in America with the help of the Japanese police. The claim that the Japanese police assist is, in reality, just turning a blind eye to the FBI's actions in Japan. Although the Japanese police's influence is somewhat limited due to Japan-US relations, they still have the capability to interfere if they truly want to. They could even potentially rescue Akai Shuichi first to use as leverage in negotiations with the FBI. Ignoring it all, perhaps it's still thanks to him saving Scotch back then. In short, the Japanese police and the FBI have maintained contact with each other, although Japan still holds some hostility. After all, the US establishing military bases and interfering in Japan's domestic affairs doesn't exactly generate goodwill, but the FBI's approach is to make the best of it, using mutual assistance as an opportunity to expose undercover agents, thereby maintaining a positive cooperative relationship. Anyone who can become an undercover agent likely has unusual perception when it comes to reading people. Akai Shuichi could tell that the relationship between Bourbon and that boy was probably not just ordinary acquaintance. Even if it had started out that way, after the boy got involved in the staged death of Scotch, they would have grown more familiar. Moreover, the family member Dazai Osamu gave him a strange feeling. Considering that perhaps he could sell Bourbon a favor, especially since the appearance of the hostage could be considered a mistake during his subordinate's operations, he might not gain much from the favor. Plus, last time, barging into the boy's house to take something, and the attention paid to Dazai Osamu. Akai Shuichi honestly didn't think much before following along. He sent a message to Bourbon's personal mailbox, giving a brief account of the situation. Of course, he vaguely omitted the part about the FBI being responsible. Finally, he attached a photo of Dazai Osamu, wanting to hear a bit of intel about Dazai Osamu. Bourbon was an intelligence agent for the organization. This black-haired boy was likely a Japanese mafia member, and his registered identity could also be fake. This intel that he's in the US, not sure if it could be exchanged with Japan's guard dog, for a slightly friendlier attitude. After a long while, Akai Shuichi finally received a reply from Bourbon. Inside was basic information about Dazai Osamu, which was simply, the youngest executive in Port Mafia's history, not a single word more. For Bourbon to replies to this message, meaning that Komaeda Nagito is indeed the child in question, but the intel provided is only that much, essentially hoping that he wouldn't meddle in other people's affairs. After all, Dazai Osamu is still Japanese. At the same time, the colleague's message also arrived. Under his instructions, they roughly investigated Dazai Osamu's whereabouts over the past 2 days, which mostly coincided with Fitzgerald's. Considering the vague shadows of some hidden secret alliances behind Fitzgerald, Akai Shuichi furrowed his brows. The Port Mafia wouldn't want to be like the liquor factory, expanding globally, would they? No. This organization has just barely established itself in Yokohama, and its boss is a smart person. They wouldn't be too reckless. Akai Shuichi put his phone back in his pocket and turned to break the silence in the corridor, speaking in Japanese, Dazai-kun. Dazai Osamu switched from an expressionless face in 1 second to a business smile devoid of sincerity. Finally finished investigating me? The FBI's efficiency is a bit slower than I expected. Trash talk has little effect on Akai Shuichi, who, without changing his expression, asked, "Why did you come to America? Is this considered an interrogation from the FBI? Helping Tei Corporation with their business, taking a vacation together with Komaeda-kun, or what?" Dazai Osamu raised an eyebrow. "I haven't done anything illegal on American soil, so the FBI shouldn't be able to meddle in my affairs, right?" Even though they had only exchanged 2 sentences, Akai Shuichi could already feel a troublesome aura from Dazai Osamu. If the questioning continued, the other party would likely say something like, "The world's police indeed have broad authority." However, Akai Shuichi's intention was not to question someone who, on the surface, had done nothing wrong like Dazai Osamu. He was indeed wary of the other's mafia background, but that wasn't the only reason for his vigilance. Dazai-kun. Akai Shuichi asked directly, does the Port Mafia know anything related to the organization with liquor names? Indeed, he intended to use this opportunity to gather some intel from the liquor factory's members. Many times, those within the organization may overlook something that outsiders can easily notice. While the FBI is often too far removed, the intelligence agents sometimes seem like they're just there for show, even less effective than amateur detectives. In such situations, it is more likely that the companions of the liquor factory could know something that they don't. The one much younger than him, based on Bourbon's information, was only a 17-year-old youth, responded with a cold smile, then let's see what the FBI can offer. It seemed like he really knew something, though it was unclear if it was the information they needed. Akai Shuichi secretly took a deep breath, preparing to enter negotiation mode, but was interrupted by Dazai Osamu. I don't want to talk about this right now. We'll discuss it once Komaeda-kun wakes up. I understand. Akai Shuichi began to sincerely hope that nothing serious happened to Komaeda Nagito. It was quite obvious, if something were to happen to Komaeda Nagito, while they might still be able to obtain intel, Dazai Osamu would definitely put up a fierce resistance. This family is really hard to handle. Unfortunately, Akai Shuichi's prayers were of no use. When the doctor came out, even with a mask covering his face, it was evident that he didn't look well. Fracture of the right leg, concussion, intracranial hematoma, the doctor with a heavy local accent said succinctly, there could be after effects, deep coma, abnormal brain waves, and we don't know when he might wake up. Akai Shuichi instinctively glanced at Dazai Osamu, noticing that the other had returned to his usual expressionless appearance. However, unlike before, when it was simply because he was too lazy to show any emotions, Dazai Osamu's eyes now had a hollow look, and his whole being seemed drained of vitality, giving off a slightly weary and distant feeling. As expected. He murmured. Anything that one does not want to lose will inevitably be lost. Even Komaeda-kun, who could always survive various unexpected situations, was no exception. No, he had thought wrong. Komaeda-kun had said. In truth, he was always more likely than others to encounter such unexpected events, and ending up like this was only a matter of time. The chest felt like something was poured into it, really disgusting, felt like throwing up. If you don't want to experience this feeling again later, letting go now is still possible. Komaeda Nagito was placed on the hospital bed and pushed out. His bloodless face passed by Dazai Osamu's indifferent gaze. Dazai Osamu watched as the hospital bed was pushed by the nurse down the hallway. A look of disgust appeared on his face, seeming both indifferent and annoyed, standing still in place without moving. The doctor finished instructing the others, and upon coming out, noticed that Dazai Osamu was still stupidly standing there. Assuming he hadn't come back to his senses, he couldn't help but pat Dazai Osamu a little. Don't just stand there foolishly, is that your younger brother? Go over there and take a look quickly. Dazai Osamu. How could he possibly look like his younger brother? The difference in foreign facial features is just too severe. Even their hair color is completely opposite. How on earth could they be mistaken for brothers? You should spend more time with him. After waking up and finding himself alone in an unfamiliar place, he might feel really scared. The doctor continued to ramble on, clearly imagining things, with a look as if wanting to comfort with some motivational talk. Wait. Dazai Osamu suddenly spoke up, didn't you say, we don't know when he might wake up? Did you think he was in a vegetative state? It's not that serious, he might just be unconscious for a few days at most. Dazai Osamu. Akai Shuichi coughed lightly, speaking in Japanese. He speaks with a very strong accent because he thinks we're all family, so he's a bit casual. You're not American, so it's normal if you mishear sometimes. I also sometimes don't understand. Actually, you can ask him to speak more slowly. If you say that, he'll understand right away. Dazai Osamu. Too casual, his emotions aren't even connected. Speechless, with the corners of his mouth twitching, Dazai Osamu turned and left. Akai Shuichi was still waiting for the surgery of the culprit in a different operating room to finish, so he didn't go with him, planning to talk again when Komaeda Nagito woke up. Dazai Osamu found Komaeda Nagito's hospital room. The FBI still had some conscience, giving him a private hospital room, and the conditions didn't seem too bad. He moved a chair to the bedside, sat down, and stared at the person in the hospital bed. Originally, his mood was somewhat heavy, but now there was a hint of curiosity. Come to think of it, he really hadn't taken care of anyone like this before. It felt like after meeting Komaeda-kun, all sorts of things that used to feel irrelevant to him had come up. Moreover, for as long as they've known each other, this was the first time Komaeda Nagito himself had been seriously injured to this extent. Truly unlucky, Komaeda-kun. Dazai Osamu casually twirled a strand of Komaeda Nagito's hair in his hand. Hurry up, let me see with this kind of injuries, what kind of luck can be exchanged. Early the next morning, Dazai Osamu was woken up. Since the hospital bed was quite large, Komaeda Nagito was very skinny, Dazai Osamu refused to sleep on the floor, and he also disliked folding beds. Unable to occupy the hospital's resources to the extent of moving another bed, he simply shared half of Komaeda Nagito's hospital bed. Of course, he chose the side without broken bones, otherwise, pressing on the patient wouldn't be very good. In short, because the distance was very close, if the person next to him made a slightly larger movement, he would wake up. Initially, it was assumed that Komaeda Nagito wouldn't wake up for at least 2 days, but unexpectedly, he woke up in less than a day. I'm really sleepy. Dazai Osamu didn't even want to open his eyes. You go ring the bell. The next second, Komaeda Nagito's words instantly brought Dazai Osamu to full alertness. Mom? Dazai Osamu. He opened his eyes, slowly sat up, and looked down at Komaeda Nagito lying beside him. Komaeda Nagito spoke in a childlike tone, saying, Mom, I can't see. Without a word, Dazai Osamu pressed the call button on the bedside to summon the doctor. The doctor hurriedly rushed over, giving Komaeda Nagito a more thorough and meticulous examination before reaching a conclusion. It is likely due to a cerebral thrombosis. Let's observe a little longer, to see if there is any improvement. Ideally, surgery should be avoided, as the brain is an extremely delicate structure. If it can heal on its own, there's no need to intervene. Oh right, his current hallucinations and tinnitus are quite severe, so speak louder when talking to him. Earlier, it seemed like he mistook you for his mother. Dazai Osamu held his forehead. Why? From the very beginning, it was clearly just helping the Tei Corporation talk about some business. Since he had never visited America and could travel together with Komaeda-kun, 2 birds with 1 stone. Clearly, these were 2 things anyone would look forward to, so why has it turned out like this now? It's not like he wanted to play the role of someone's beloved mother. Maybe he really wasn't feeling well, as Komaeda Nagito woke up briefly, and after the doctor finished examining him, he quickly fell asleep again, as if he had woken up just to tease Dazai Osamu. Dazai Osamu stared at Komaeda Nagito silently for a moment, then bowed his head and began sending a message to Oda Sakanosuke, asking what things this young dad, who had adopted a few children, needed to pay attention to when taking care of them. Komaeda Nagito couldn't even speak English at the moment, so expecting him to directly make requests to the nurse was impossible. Due to the time difference, Oda Sakanosuke replied quite quickly, there are many things to pay attention to, why are you suddenly asking about this? Komaeda-kun has amnesia, and now he roughly has the memories of a 6-year-old. Dazai Osamu actually didn't really want to know about these things, he just wanted an excuse to complain, in a foreign country, and he also can't speak English. Ah, why not just call Kudo Sunichi and his little girlfriend here to help figure it out? Dazai Osamu's mind was in a daze, and his thoughts were in complete disarray. He truly had no preparation for this situation at all. Right now, he felt like a man suddenly thrown into fatherhood, with his heart filled with nothing but shock and confusion, along with a bit of avoidance, unwilling to accept reality. Komaeda-kun, although I was indeed really looking forward to seeing what unexpected surprises you could bring, this is just too over the top, totally unnecessary. Dazai-osamu, speechless, tapped on his phone, and exchanged a few words with Oda-saku, who was in Japan, about a topic he thought he'd never ask about in his life, venting his grievances in the process. Oda-saku-no-suke, after all, the body is that of an adult. I know it might not necessarily be useful, but right now he needs to understand more that his body and the consciousness of his age don't match. He can't act according to the form he remembers. Being reckless is also detrimental to his understanding of the current situation. I suggest not letting him act alone. Dazai-osamu, his leg is practically severed, it's not like I could let him go alone anyway. Oda-saku-no-suke, in this kind of situation, the doctor and nurse are more knowledgeable, right? Dazai-osamu, the doctor's accent is too thick, listening to him gives me a headache. We'll ask someone else tomorrow. As for the nurse, she's a racist, she'll be gone by tomorrow anyway. Oda-saku-no-suke, you're still overseas. You should restrain yourself a little. Dazai-osamu, I am just exercising my normal right to complain. As for how he plans to gather evidence, there was no need to tell Oda-saku. Though Dazai-osamu was quite idle, Oda-saku-no-suke, as a lower-level employee, was heavily exploited, truly busy. After caring a bit about Komaeda Nagito's situation and expressing his hope that Dazai-osamu would take good care of Komaeda Nagito, he went back to work. Dazai-osamu sighed, realizing that there was no one left to banter with. Bungo was simply a corporate slave, even busier than Oda-saku and him combined, so there was no way he would listen to his complaints. Dazai-osamu tilted his head, looking at the sleeping past version of Komaeda Nagito. He imagined a 6-year-old Komaeda Nagito and applied the same tone as before, but couldn't hold back his laughter. Although it's really fun, I honestly don't like taking care of children. Dazai-osamu poked Komaeda Nagito's face. Hurry and get up, Komaeda-kun, or I'll just leave you behind, okay? Whether it was Dazai-osamu's prayers that worked or Komaeda Nagito's good luck, the next morning when he woke up, his condition had improved a lot. Although his eyesight had not yet recovered, his hearing had returned, and his memories had also come back to his 14-year-old self after a good sleep. Whoa, this time gap is really wide. Next time you wake up, you won't think you're 20 years old, right? Dazai-osamu said, sitting at the edge of the bed, teasing. But you've recovered well, it looks like surgery won't be necessary. Komaeda Nagito couldn't see him, but because he was used to it, he instinctively turned his head in his direction and said, Dazai-kun, right? You just said you were my friend? That's right. Dazai-osamu said confidently, taking a bite of an apple, you don't remember it now, but we are indeed friends. Truly sorry, but I forgot about you. I'm really not worthy of being called a friend, but you're still willing to consider me as one. Dazai-kun, you truly are a generous person. I even trouble you to take care of me, I really don't know how to thank you properly. If you really want to thank me, then hurry up and get back to normal. I have no intention of talking to this memoryless version of you, Dazai-osamu said bluntly. This feeling of being emotionally drained overnight is truly unpleasant. It was already difficult enough to get Komaeda-kun to acknowledge him as a friend, and now he's back to this polite yet distant state. It's nowhere near as adorable as that 6-year-old Komaeda at dawn. Komaeda Nagito pondered for a few seconds, then revealed a bright smile and said, I understand. Could you give me the fruit knife for a moment? Chapter 58 End. Chapter 59, The Letter from Soseki Sanbo. If a nurse was here right now, they probably wouldn't think too much about it and would just hand the fruit knife to Komaeda Nagito. However, the fruit knife is currently in Dazai-osamu's hand, and for Dazai-osamu, there's no need to think much, the answer is simply no. You can't even see properly, what do you need a fruit knife for? Dazai-osamu, with a smile that wasn't quite a smile, twirled the fruit knife, causing sunlight to reflect off the blade and flicker into Komaeda Nagito's eyes, yet it didn't elicit any reaction from him. Komaeda Nagito showed an awkward expression, wanting to speak but hesitating. Let me guess. Dazai-osamu once again held the peeled apple, right now, after you grabbed the knife, the only one you could harm is yourself, isn't it? You're not confident in handling anything else. Ah, are you planning to harm yourself? Having his intentions so easily deduced, Komaeda Nagito was a bit startled, but quickly returned to normal. Looks like Dazai-kun has seen me do this before, huh? After all, they were friends, so it was normal to be familiar with each other's habits. No, it's just that you mentioned before that you might do this. Dazai Osamu mused, I've never seen it with my own eyes, actually I'm a bit curious. But not now. If it weren't for, no longer human, being Dazai Osamu's own ability, knowing what level Komaeda Nagito could achieve, he would have doubted the conclusion, Komaeda Nagito has no ability, had some issues. Ha! Just listen. Controlling luck. No matter to what extent he could do it, even if it were only from 0 to 0.1, as long as it was true, it would be enough to make people feel complicated, because a true ordinary person shouldn't even be able to do 0.0001, let alone 0.1. Although Dazai Osamu has always publicly declared Komaeda Nagito to be an ordinary person, in fact, he has a different idea. In the world, it isn't only ordinary people and ability users. It's not about abilities, perhaps it's some other kind of system, such as the Vangala family's dying will flame, which doesn't belong to abilities. But it still seems to have some kind of rational scientific explanation. The Vangala family has many scientists specializing in researching this area, which ability users clearly cannot achieve. Scientists are helpless when it comes to abilities, and there are many secrets in the world that the governments don't know. So what kind of situation does Komaeda Nagito belong to? Dazai Osamu casually pondered this matter, not particularly fixated on the answer, just a bit curious. Moreover, it only served to increase his interest in Komaeda Nagito a little more. You guessed right. Komaeda Nagito admitted, haha, I didn't think that just from one sentence, you'd figure out what I was trying to do. It feels like, detective, would suit you more, Dazai-kun. Sharp enough to catch the subtlety in Komaeda Nagito's last words, Dazai Osamu's hand paused for a moment, and the apple peel he was carving instantly snapped off. Komaeda Nagito couldn't see, so he took advantage of it, quietly gathering the broken apple peel to one side while speaking in a completely normal tone. Although my ability is sufficient for me to be a detective, I still think I'm better suited to the meaning of my name. A name might influence a person's life, though it sounds like a joke, sometimes it's true. Those who understand Dazai Osamu know that he isn't just about bloody and violent methods. Rather, his persuasive skills are more prominent, and the art of veiled conversation was something no one had ever taught him. It felt almost like an instinct. Komaeda Nagito, without doubting him, spoke according to this topic. I really look forward to Dazai-kun's books. Perhaps I read it before I lost my memory, but now I have no recollection at all, which is really regrettable. My next request might be a bit presumptuous. Dazai-kun, could you read it to me? Perfect. Dazai Osamu thought to himself. He finally understood why, back at the noodle shop that year, Komaeda Nagito had simply asked him, when are you going to publish your book? It seems that, in Komaeda Nagito's perception, the name, Dazai Osamu, belonged to a writer. Oh, Oda Sakanosuke, probably was, too. What a pity, I feel ashamed even thinking about writing myself. Dazai Osamu said with an unchanged expression, wait until your eyes are better and read it yourself. What kind of joke is this? Even Port Mafia work reports, he would avoid writing if he could, let alone find some, Dazai Osamu's literary works, to read to Komaeda. More than that, he was more curious about where exactly Komaeda-kun got such an impression. Facing Dazai Osamu's refusal, Komaeda Nagito smiled wryly and said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to force you, Dazai-kun. It was too much for me to ask. Dazai Osamu didn't want to continue with this topic. Kudo-kun said he wanted to visit you. Do you want to meet him? Kudo Yusaku seems to have some connections with the FBI. He called the hospital, and the doctor also told Kudo Yusaku about Komaeda Nagito's memories returning to when he was 14 years old. Kudo Shinichi explained that last year, he had already become quite familiar with Komaeda-kun because he kept asking him about Yokohama matters. He probably wouldn't refuse to visit him, but whether the hospital visit would go through mainly depended on Komaeda Nagito himself and the family's opinion. Komaeda Nagito fell into an eerie silence for a moment before asking in confusion, Kudo-kun? Is he also my friend? Dazai-osamu raised an eyebrow. He's your junior. It seems you've lost more than just 1 year of memory. Just a quick question, where did you attend middle school? Komaeda Nagito reported a name that did not belong to Beika Middle School. Dazai-osamu searched online a bit, but couldn't find anything. Dazai-osamu fell into deep thought. Komaeda Nagito was made slightly uneasy by his silence. He was smart enough as it was, and soon realized the issue. My middle school has an issue. No, is the problem with my memory bigger than I thought? Pretty much. Dazai-osamu, having tested up to now, no longer needed to hide it, and directly repeated the doctor's words. The brain is a very delicate structure, falling from the 3rd floor, it's normal to have some issues. I just didn't expect the problems to manifest in such a strange way. These are all lies. Even if Komaeda-kun's memory has issues, at least when he saw the others for the 2nd time, the problem already existed, and it wasn't because of this fall. Komaeda Nagito fell silent for a moment. He sensed that Dazai-osamu seemed to be testing something, but he didn't think he had any value worth testing. If they wanted to investigate him, his life was very easy to trace, almost nothing was hidden. There was no need to make things so complicated, let alone come personally just for some pleasantries. Dazai-osamu noticed Komaeda Nagito's suspicion and hesitation. He thought for a moment and then spoke casually, though I'm quite curious about your current memories. If you're really that concerned, why not just take a nap now? Maybe when you wake up, your memories will return. Komaeda Nagito tilted his head and spoke softly, you want to know, but you're not going to keep asking? No need. I can wait until you regain your memories to ask again, Dazai-osamu said with a laugh. Or I could slowly figure it out myself, which is quite interesting too. Dazai-kun. Sorry for doubting you just now, Komaeda Nagito said with a helpless smile. I'm feeling a bit confused right now. Dazai-osamu showed a rare understanding expression. Memory is a point that establishes one's own existence. Discovering that the memories related to oneself are unreliable will shake that foundation. It's quite normal. Thank you for understanding. Komaeda Nagito hesitated for a moment, then awkwardly asked, so, Dazai-kun, are you really my friend? Of course. Dazai-osamu dried off the fruit knife, placed it into Komaeda Nagito's hand, and then grasped Komaeda's hand, guiding the blade to point at his own throat. He smiled nonchalantly. I am Komaeda-kun's genuine friend, you know. If Komaeda-kun kills a friend, perhaps he could regain his lost memories. Isn't it worth a try? Komaeda Nagito frowned. Dazai-kun. I am not joking. Dazai-osamu said, this place is a hospital, probably I won't die so easily, so you don't need to feel any burden. Simply put, I suddenly wanted to be killed by Komaeda-kun once and try it out. Because it's my own choice, it should be considered a form of suicide, right? I've never succeeded in dying from my suicide attempts. I can assure you of that. No, there's no need to assure that. If Dazai-kun can still appear in front of me, it's definitely because all your suicides failed. Komaeda Nagito finally couldn't maintain that polite yet distant demeanor and couldn't help but make a sarcastic comment, this kind of meaningless suicide, I reject it. But even the obsession with suicide has been passed on, huh? Names are truly fascinating. Dazai-osamu had been in a somewhat gloomy mood ever since Komaeda Nagito regained consciousness, but now, after hearing the sarcastic remark, he felt a bit better. To you, some mafia called Mori Ogai is fascinating? Truly amazing, even if one doesn't become a writer, it seems like they should at least be a military doctor. But the name is just a reflection of the parents' wishes, what a person themselves wants to do still mainly depends on their talents. After all, the kind of person one can become is already determined from birth. A military doctor, huh? To Komaeda Nagito, does it mean Mori Ogai, apart from writing, also had ties with the military? Dazai Osamu's thoughts shifted, and he casually said aloud, some people abandon what they are good at to pursue something they aren't as good at but enjoy more. Saying so, doesn't that make it entirely worthless? Komaeda Nagito woke up, listened to the doctor's explanation of his condition, and even after learning that he had lost his memory, he remained calm. However, now he suddenly became agitated, pulling his hand away from Dazai Osamu's hand. Only by striving to improve oneself can one create value. If you give up, it is practically like giving up on your own life. Clearly there is a chance to become hope, so why give up? Just thinking about it is already too much, isn't it unimaginable? If you miss the opportunity to enter Hope's Peak because of this, the price paid for such recklessness is too high. Only someone whose mind isn't clear would do something like this, right? How could Dazai-kun have such a terrifying idea? Dazai Osamu leaned closer to the back of the chair. Ah, I see, so that's what you're thinking. Doesn't Dazai-kun think that way? Komaeda Nagito casually placed the fruit knife within arm's reach, bracing himself on the bed to sit up straighter. If one's self has no value, then that's it. Clearly having hope only to abandon it again. Ah, it's too despairing, just thinking about it makes me despair beyond acceptance. Unable to accept a life of hope, it's truly the same as being defeated by despair. Komaeda-kun. Dazai Osamu quietly listened for a moment before asking, what exactly did you mean by hope just now? On TV, in newspapers, all kinds of propaganda, haven't they always been talking about it? I want to hear Komaeda-kun's answer. It's talent. Talented individuals. It feels ordinary, and each time it's Komaeda Nagito himself who causes annoyance to others. No one has ever seriously asked about this topic, so the tone was somewhat uncertain. People without talents, those who can't win, those who don't make an effort. They're all equivalent to garbage. Talents are the hope of humanity. I see. Dazai Osamu felt he understood something, tapping his own knee with his fingers. In Komaeda-kun's memory, all the propaganda was about preaching this concept, right? This kind of propaganda is truly fascinating, almost like some kind of game setting. It really is an extreme society. Komaeda Nagito pressed his temples with a headache. Dazai-kun, your words are so strange. If even hope isn't worth pursuing, then isn't this world beyond saving? This world is also really strange. To me, the world Komaeda-kun remembers is even stranger. Dazai Osamu replied, in a normal world, people wouldn't risk everything for such an obscure concept. No, perhaps Komaeda-kun is also quite special. Doubting something that was very important to him, Komaeda Nagito fell silent for a few seconds before suddenly raising the hand holding the fruit knife. Dazai Osamu, with swift reflexes, caught his wrist. Due to Komaeda Nagito's emotions being a bit agitated, Dazai Osamu didn't feel it was a good idea to keep letting Komaeda Nagito hold the knife pointed at himself, so he relaxed his hand, and the fruit knife ended up in Komaeda Nagito's hand. Komaeda Nagito had always acted relatively calmly, but unexpectedly, he became difficult to deal with now. However, Dazai Osamu, who was able to control Komaeda Nagito's movements, stopped the action of the knife being thrust downward, though he couldn't immediately control Komaeda Nagito's fingers. Komaeda Nagito's fingers swiftly shifted their posture, throwing the fruit knife like a dart. Dazai Osamu's eyes followed the knife as it flew outward, noticing that, despite Komaeda Nagito's blindness, the fruit knife precisely hit a button on the side of the hospital bed. The next moment, the bed, which had been partially elevated, lowered back down. Just that. Dazai Osamu slowly released Komaeda Nagito's wrist, walked over, and intended to pick up the fruit knife. At this moment, the originally stable frame suddenly wobbled a little, as if some component had malfunctioned, making a strange sound. Immediately afterward, the side guard rail that wasn't supposed to be lifted suddenly rose automatically without any human intervention, lifting from a drooping state to a spread-wing state, brushing quickly past the temporarily unused IV stand beside it, but then returned back as if it was correcting itself. The IV stand swayed slightly after being bumped, leaning a bit outward before tilting back. but since it wasn't secured in place, it lost balance and tipped straight toward the direction of the hospital bed. The entire process wasn't fast. Dazai Osamu had plenty of time to intervene. However, he simply picked up the small knife and calmly stood in place, watching this unexpected incident unfold until the end. Komaeda Nagito was hit on the head by the IV stand. Seeing this scene, Dazai Osamu couldn't help but think, as expected. Using a knife to harm himself was stopped, then he took a detour to save the country. In such a way that Komaeda-kun succeeded. For Komaeda-kun, even if luck is not entirely proactive, it can still be considered a semi-proactive ability. Dazai Osamu walked over to lift the IV stand and bent down to check Komaeda Nagito's injuries. No bleeding, but bruised all over, judging that the concussion might worsen. But isn't this exactly what Komaeda-kun wanted? Dazai Osamu sighed softly, then sat down to the side, waiting in anticipation for Komaeda Nagito to wake up next time. This time in a coma, Komaeda Nagito was unconscious for about 2 days, entirely relying on IV fluids to not starve to death. When he woke up, the first thing that reached his ears was Dazai Osamu's displeased voice. "This morning I just finished signing a contract with Fitzgerald, and in the afternoon you called to urge me to return to the country. Considering Japan's time zone, I don't know whether I should admire your dedication to work or complain about you overworking your subordinates. Boss Mori, as a worker who takes a few days off in the name of work and then returns, both sides tacitly avoiding this topic is the usual rule of society, isn't it? Without me, the port mafia would come to a complete halt, which makes me think that maybe I am actually the boss of the port mafia. Mori-san, please stop bringing this up if you don't want me to start contemplating it. You really should think it over a bit more." Saying this, Dazai Osamu, who was standing by the window on the phone, shifted his posture, turning around to lean against the wall, wanting to be more comfortable while continuing the call. In the end, in a moment, he ended up sprawled on a hospital bed, quietly locking eyes with Komaeda Nagito. "Boss, I heard you have something urgent to handle over there." Casually making a few perfunctory remarks before ending the call, Dazai Osamu approached the hospital bed, pondering as he asked, "How old are you this year?" Komaeda Nagito first couldn't help but laugh a little, then said helplessly, "Right now, I don't even know how old I should be. If we're talking about psychological age, maybe I'm even older than Dazai-kun." "Oh, seems like your last memories are returning." Dazai Osamu gave an intrigued smile, glanced at the pile of clothes on the chair, and casually sat down on the edge of the bed. "Go on then, tell me about that other Chunibyo world in your memory." "Chunibyo, really, Dazai-kun, you're so sharp-tongued ah. If you still remember how you explained to me the importance of hope and that talents are the future, then you'll understand why I say that." Komaeda Nagito said awkwardly, "People often call me a weirdo, but saying I'm a middle school syndrome person is not a lot." Dazai Osamu didn't bother with this topic. Even with just a few words, it was enough for him to understand how Komaeda Nagito, in the memories of another world, was filled with fervent rhetoric, capable of brainwashing anyone without leaving a gap. He finally understood why Komaeda Nagito was so obsessed with talents. It turns out he had been influenced by memories of another world. However, the Komaeda Nagito who had regained his memories seemed noticeably calmer compared to his previous amnesiac state. Could it be because he now had the memories of this world too? Dazai Osamu is not Komaeda Nagito. He couldn't quite understand how Komaeda Nagito's memories fused, only roughly guessing how the different social environments influence personality and thinking. So he asked again, "In that other part of life, how old are you, Komaeda-kun?" "Anyway, older than Dazai-kun." Komaeda Nagito sighed, If Dazai-kun already knows about it to some extent, I might as well just tell Dazai-kun everything. Actually, I'm a bit confused myself right now." Saying that, Komaeda Nagito pressed his head. He kept experiencing incidents one after another, and each time he recalled memories from a different world, the intense and illusory pain had disappeared. Now, when he remembers something, it's just like an ordinary person. He only has a vague image, and can no longer remember every detail clearly. It's fortunate that he completed the task assigned by Natsume-sensei beforehand. At present, he can no longer fulfill the manuscripting task. He's now completely an ordinary person, utterly incapable of assisting sensei. The disappearance of the hyperthymesia effect is just one of the consequences of the incident. There's another part of the effect, similarly influencing his memories. He recalled all the memories from an alternate world. Whether it was those few years he spent at Hope's Peak Academy, or his time as a remnant of despair, his consciousness trapped in the Hope Rebirth program, experiencing the memories of mutual slaughter among his former classmates, or when he was reawakened later, seeing Hinata Hajime in that instant, it all came back. That's pretty much how it is. Komaeda Nagito concisely recounted his experiences in that alternate world to Dazai Osamu. Dazai Osamu, upon hearing the delicious drama, praised, "Seems like it's not an illusion, the details are thorough to this level, it must be another parallel world. Actually, once you accept this hypothesis, it becomes quite emotional." What, Chunibyo? This is a completely different world with its own logic, there's no Chunibyo. Komaeda-kun's mind is truly fascinating, giving him surprise after surprise. Before arriving in America, he had never considered anything about a parallel world. Komaeda Nagito pinched his chin in contemplation, "But I'm really troubled, I feel there's something I can't figure out." "Are you feeling that, transmigrating to this world in quite a strange time? Speaking of this, I must say, Komaeda-kun, your suicide was really very ingenious." Dazai Osamu looked at Komaeda Nagito with a truly peculiar expression. "That was truly a trap that only Komaeda-kun could set, using your own luck to commit suicide and create a trap. It's a cunning scheme that others have no way of countering. To be able to apply oneself to this extent, Komaeda-kun, you've really been far too modest all this time." "Ahaha, Dazai-kun, you're flattering me." Komaeda Nagito sighed, "In the end, I couldn't become Hope. But for the time being, I might be seen as a stepping stone for Hope, as everyone succeeded from the steps of awakening, including me. Though I had considered this possibility at that time, I was really worried that my unfortunate efforts weren't significant enough to reach this conclusion. Indeed, precisely because of this, I'm a bit confused about my current situation." Simply put, Komaeda Nagito initially thought he had died in another world and then crossed over to this world to inhabit his own body. But now he realizes that he didn't actually die, which makes the previous assumption invalid. Dazai Osamu gently said, "Consider it simply, if in no world did Komaeda-kun die, then could it be a different situation? For example, Komaeda-kun might just have obtained memories from another world's version of yourself, and due to the shock of death, your thoughts became chaotic. Although you were awakened afterward, you still, after all, experienced death once in the hypothetical world, didn't you? I truly admire Komaeda-kun for that. So, there was never any crossing over. Komaeda-kun has always been this world's Komaeda-kun, just with an additional set of memories." Komaeda Nagito thought for a moment, it might just be as Dazai-kun analyzed. Dazai Osamu curiously asked, "I wonder what Komaeda-kun's personality was like in that other world's memories. From the data, it seems hard to tell. Komaeda-kun, do you think there's been a major change in yourself?" "Actually, there's not much change," Komaeda Nagito honestly replied. Dazai Osamu was silent for a second. "I figured as much. Even if there were changes, they wouldn't be significant. Most likely, it's just a difference between going quite mad and going slightly less mad. Otherwise, Kudo Shinichi would have noticed." In other words, in this world, Komaeda-kun still strives towards hope, doesn't he? Though it must be somewhat different from the hope of that other world, right? Dazai Osamu was just about to say something when his phone suddenly rang. He glanced at the screen, sighed, then picked up. "Mori-san. I'm not calling to urge you to come back," Mori Ogai said in a low voice. "Did something happen to Komaeda-kun?" "Yes. How did Mori-san know?" He didn't recall the port mafia having any links overseas, though. Mori Ogai silently stared at the letter in his hand. "The signature is Soseki Sanbo. How I know isn't your concern. Tell me Komaeda-kun's current situation." To think he even went so far as to send a letter here just for Komaeda-kun. "Sensei, why have I never received this kind of special treatment? Chapter 59 End. Chapter 60, The Little Junior Brother and Crime and Punishment. Mori Ogai received the letter, which came from Natsume Soseki. Back then, when he and Fukuzawa Yukichi were both under the guidance of Natsume Soseki-sensei, the location was set at the Soseki Sandbo, so as soon as Mori Ogai saw this signature, he knew it was a letter from Natsume-sensei. Natsume-sensei's style is quite old-fashioned. Compared to something like a mobile phone, choosing to send a letter isn't surprising at all. The letter is from Mori Ogai's private route, otherwise it wouldn't have been able to reach his hands so quickly. However, since he chose to send the letter, this to a certain extent indicates that the matter isn't very urgent, otherwise he would have chosen a quicker and more covert method. Natsume Soseki-sensei had not contacted him for a long time. Even though he knew that the message wouldn't contain anything important, Mori Ogai was still very excited because this action itself meant that Natsume-sensei had always been watching him. Maybe he could take this opportunity to reconnect with Natsume-sensei. Currently, he really needed the skilled business permit. Compared to blindly struggling alone, if Natsume-sensei, who had significant influence within the government, was willing to help, it would save a lot of trouble. Mori Ogai confirmed the safety of the content after checking it with inspection tools, so he proceeded to the content without hesitation. He didn't care about the dismissive tone on the other end of the phone from Dazai Osamu, letting the other party hang up while he eagerly opened the letter himself. What is Natsume-sensei writing about this time? While opening the letter, Mori Ogai's mind was still in a whirlwind. Is it because he recently makes plan for the skilled business permit? The likelihood is very low. Natsume-sensei had already said when he and Fukuzawa Yukichi became his apprentices that from now on they must rely on themselves. Unless it's a serious situation, he won't interfere with how they move forward, basically letting them run free. Thinking back and forth, Mori Ogai still couldn't figure out what the letter would say. Fortunately, the answer was right in his hands, and he quickly unfolded the letter. The letter's content was very concise, summarizable in a single sentence. Komai Dakuen was gravely injured and in a coma in the United States. Is Dazai Osamu taking good care of him? Mori Ogai. That's it. The content of the letter was far beyond expectations. Mori Ogai turned the letter paper back and forth, even examining the envelope to see if there was any hidden writing. 10 minutes later, he rested his hands on the table and pressed his forehead against them, staring at the slightly thin sheet of paper placed on the table. He stared at it for half a day but couldn't discern anything from it. It really was just an ordinary letter, no signals, no codes. Mori Ogai finally concluded. This letter addressed to him, apart from having his name written on it, had nothing whatsoever to do with Mori Ogai. Natsume-sensei. Sensei. What are you doing, sensei? After so long, it was so long for you to write a letter for me, and this is the result? Sensei, you're deceiving my feelings, you know that? With a headache, Mori Ogai pressed his forehead and did not immediately contact Dazai Osamu, who he had just called. Instead, he had someone check on Komaeda Nagito's recent situation. Komaeda Nagito isn't exactly the type of big shot who hides his own whereabouts, so tracking him down was pretty fast. But all they could find was that he took a flight to the United States, then booked a hotel, and that something happened at the hotel a few days ago, the details of which were blocked by the FBI. Not many people witnessed it, and the port mafia didn't have the resources to expand overseas. This time, sending Dazai Osamu to contact the leader of the guild, Fitzgerald, was merely an experiment. And this time, there was no need to use Fitzgerald's power. Asking him was less effective than asking Dazai Osamu. However, how did Natsume-sensei know that Komaeda-kun was seriously injured? After investigating for a while, Mori Ogai found this somewhat incomprehensible. He understood Komaeda Nagito's personality well. He would never trouble Natsume Soseki just because he was injured. Moreover, there was no practical use in contacting Natsume-sensei in this situation. Even if Natsume-sensei were the Prime Minister of Japan, he wouldn't be able to help. The information said that Komaeda was critically injured and unconscious, so it must have been someone else who told Natsume-sensei. Was it the FBI? But was it necessary to involve the FBI just for Komaeda-kun? Mori Ogai thought until he had a headache. He believed that Natsume-sensei would not waste a favor like this, but the letter in front of him made him waver. The police over there. Right, probably intel from the Japanese police. Mori Ogai pressed the bridge of his nose. But since when did the Japanese police have such a good relationship with the FBI? Though it took a roundabout route, Mori Ogai still managed to deduce the correct answer. After Akai Shuichi shared information with the Japanese police, Furuyare passed it on to Morofushi Hiromitsu, the one who had been indirectly saved by Komaeda Nagito. Morofushi Hiromitsu is currently working in the National Police Agency force. Upon receiving news related to Komaeda Nagito, he became somewhat concerned and quickly recalled the last time the police had used him to investigate information about Komaeda Nagito. Therefore, he deliberately didn't hide his own worries. As a newly joined special member, his superior, who had recently been keeping an eye on Morofushi Hiromitsu, saw him like that and asked what had happened. "It's really rare to see you like this," the superior said. For someone like Morofushi Hiromitsu, who had been undercover in a dangerous organization for many years, such behavior was usually devoid of emotional fluctuations. The higher-ups were curious about what could make Morofushi Hiromitsu behave like this, while also worrying that if even Morofushi Hiromitsu had this attitude, there might be something significant happening. However, as Morofushi Hiromitsu is within the NPA, they hadn't received any strange information. Morofushi Hiromitsu smiled bitterly. "It's my own matter." The superior, understanding without pressing further, simply said, "If it's too difficult, and you need help, you can speak up. We'll see if there's any way to assist." "It was the child who saved me before, Komaeda-kun," Morofushi Hiromitsu said, while carefully observing his superior's expression. "He went to America for a trip, but something happened." For someone trained in espionage techniques, watching his superior, who had always worked in the office, trying to act was so shallow it could be discerned at a glance, so Morofushi Hiromitsu precisely caught his superior's subtle reaction to the surname, Komaeda. "Oh." His superior paused for a moment and asked, "What happened?" Morofushi Hiromitsu then repeated the information that Furuyare had given him. "FBI intel, huh? I see." The superior said, frowning, "Don't worry, you've read that kid's file too. He wouldn't go down so easily." The true culprit had already gone halfway to the other side, but Komaeda Nagito's miraculous luck still seemed to operate as usual. After reassuring his subordinates, the superior immediately turned around and sold this information to those who might pay attention to Komaeda Nagito. Previously, the Japanese police suddenly investigated Komaeda Nagito, and most people thought it was for Morofushi Hiromitsu's flawless faked death. However, he knew their target was actually Komaeda Nagito. Perhaps sensing his thoughts, the higher-up took the time to explain a bit further. "Komaeda, this child, his father was a friend of mine. Originally, we only intended to protect him in secret, but unexpectedly, the kid got caught up in that previous incident." The superior immediately understood. Komaeda Nagito wasn't closely connected to the people he wanted to favored with. He was simply helping out a friend by taking care of an orphan, and the incident involving the police last time made him a bit worried, prompting a recheck to see if there was any other danger around. But what if, by any chance? Even a small favor is still a favor. The superior casually mentioned this information during a coffee break, and the other party calmly acknowledged it, instructing them not to meddle in this matter further. And so, they really didn't. The information passed through several hands, eventually reaching someone rather familiar with Natsume Soseki, which meant that Natsume Soseki also became aware of it. Although even if Natsume Soseki was a friend, he still didn't know what kind of relationship he had with Komaeda Nagito, so he casually asked, "Have you been paying attention to this child lately? Let's say I find his luck somewhat interesting." Natsume Soseki provided a particularly convincing excuse, and this excuse was something that anyone who had seen Komaeda Nagito's information would believe, a perfect smoke screen. But there's no need to disturb his daily life because of this, he's just an ordinary person. The other person nodded, I understand. This is why, after passing through the hands of both the Special Division and the Japanese police, Komaeda Nagito's presence felt noticeably diminished. Even mentioning his name was often more about his luck rather than anything special about him. The unwritten rule was to avoid dragging ordinary people into their affairs whenever possible. In the end, although it took some time, Natsume Soseki finally obtained intel from his young disciple. Considering what he had overheard at the bar earlier about Dazai Osamu's plan to go to America, Natsume Soseki began to have some suspicions, and eventually wrote the letter to Mori Ogai. He didn't write the information in too much detail, only mentioning that Komaeda Nagito was seriously injured. If Dazai Osamu was his friend and also in the US, could he perhaps go and check on the situation? They couldn't keep bothering the FBI all the time. Even though he knew that Komaeda Nagito was probably not in serious danger in the end, the outcome couldn't hide the process. A serious injury was certain, and it was a head injury. As his teacher, he truly couldn't rest easy. If Mori Ogai knew Natsume Soseki's thoughts, he'd surely have something to say. However, seeing the outcome of this letter, it actually wasn't too far off. Although Mori Ogai looks like he had eaten 10 pounds of lemons, with his heart continuously pouring bitter water, this letter was not without value. He finally received confirmation from the person himself that Komaeda Nagito was indeed Natsume-sensei's disciple, his junior disciple, let alone a relative. After investigating many times, the Komaeda family had no familial ties to Natsume-sensei. Only the identity of a junior disciple could explain why Natsume-sensei would intentionally write a letter for him. Although he had never received this kind of treatment, thinking that Fukuzawa Yukichi probably hadn't either, Mori Ogai felt much better. Indeed, people still need something to compare against. Mori Ogai chose to follow Natsume-sensei's suggestion and called Dazai Osamu. At this point, he finally understood why he had urged Dazai Osamu to return earlier, only for Dazai Osamu to come up with all sorts of excuses, saying he wanted a vacation in America. Turns out it was because Komaeda Nagito was also there. Couldn't he just say outright that Komaeda Nagito was seriously injured? What was the point of hiding that from him? Mori Ogai deeply felt Dazai Osamu's aversion towards him. But no matter what, even if he indeed had always been wary of Dazai Osamu and secretly considered whether to make a move or not, he didn't intend to tear things apart with Dazai Osamu just yet. Thus, Mori Ogai made a phone call, inquired a bit about Komaeda Nagito's recent situation, then put on an expression of a good leader and said, I see, then take some time off, and have a good time with Komaeda-kun in America. Just be back before the end of the month. But since you're already in America, see if there's anything you can do, and give it a try. Dazai Osamu noticed the change in Mori Ogai's attitude, cast a subtle glance at Komaeda Nagito, and said nothing, just nodded. After all, it was the FBI who caused the trouble, and they made sure Komaeda Nagito rested peacefully in the hospital. In contrast, Dazai Osamu inexplicably ended up busy, having discussion with both the FBI and Fitzgerald. Kudo Shinichi was initially quite worried when visiting Komaeda Nagito, speaking rather cautiously. After a while, once Komaeda Nagito had fully recovered his spirits, he no longer held back and complained. Senpai, this time you came to America, but you basically didn't get to enjoy it at all. There was just that initial boat ride on the sea, then a meal on board, and a brief walk on the beach. Even on the beach, he barely had any fun, and then there was the unexpected 10-year bazooka encounter. Only a little time was left to actually enjoy some water activities, and shortly after returning to the hotel, an accident had him ending up in the hospital. Moreover, judging by the looks of it, it seems he need to rest for quite some more time. At least it looks like he can make it back home as planned, but if you want to continue traveling to other places in America, it might be too much. Komaeda Nagito smiled wryly. Ha ha ha, honestly, I did consider the possibility of this kind of thing happening. But ending up in the hospital on the first day is still a bit. How about you, Kudo-kun? How was it? Kudo Shinichi replied with a complex expression. how should I put it, playing with Tsuna is still manageable. Reborn-san invited me to observe their training, and I tagged along, picking up sniping and flying a plane along the way. It feels like they're using me to motivate Tsuna. Sawada Tsunayoshi is the 10th boss of the Vongala family, an old Italian mafia organization, but until now, he has grown up in Japan as an ordinary person. At first, Kudo Shinichi was a bit awkward, but after understanding Sawada Tsunayoshi's situation, he could only feel sympathy. Sawada Tsunayoshi never wanted to be this Vongala Decimo, he just wanted to live an ordinary life. However, the current situation is not that simple. Due to various reasons, Sawada Tsunayoshi had no choice but to accept the sudden change in his life, and he's making an effort to do well. However, this doesn't mean he completely gave up as an ordinary people. Currently, he quite likes interacting with friends like Kudo Shinichi, who is full of a sense of righteousness, very smart, and can distinguish between him and the Vongala Decimo. Kudo Shinichi doesn't object to this at all. After all, being friends with Sawada Tsunayoshi doesn't mean he has to go kill people. In everyday life, Sawada Tsunayoshi is no different from a normal middle school student. Besides, he's also quite curious about the mafia family, often pulling Sawada Tsunayoshi to ask non-stop questions. Sawada Tsunayoshi ended up answering the questions with, "I don't know," because he couldn't keep up with the new friend in front of him, and had no choice but to turn to Reborn for help, desperately trying to make up for the lack of interest he had in basic mafia knowledge. Reborn also noticed that Kudo Shinichi was someone who had no intention of getting deeply involved with the mafia, yet somehow managed to get Sawada Tsunayoshi suddenly eager to study, which led to his suggestion to bring Kudo Shinichi along to the training ground. Of course, without saying anything directly, he also informed Sawada Tsunayoshi that the training Kudo Shinichi was doing was all something that an ordinary person could handle, like piloting a plane, shooting practice, and so on. After all, in America, there are a lot of people learning this kind of stuff legally, as it's legal to carry guns there. To sum it up, Kudo Shinichi, a teenager who is fully dedicated to becoming a famous detective, somehow ended up getting involved with the Italian mafia and even attended their Hawaii training camp. Looking back, Kudo Shinichi himself finds it incredible. After ranting with Komaeda Nagito, Kudo Shinichi concluded, "Although when I'm back in Japan, these skills are probably not going to be used, but I still think this vacation was pretty fulfilling." "Don't say that," Komaeda Nagito comforted him. "Who knows, maybe you will get to use them." Kudo Shinichi, "Although I did complain earlier, that really sounds quite unlucky, senpai." At this moment, Kudo Shinichi didn't know that the skills he was currently learning would be of great help to him later. Though he still held some prejudice against the mafia, he considered himself to have befriended Sawada Tsunayoshi, who was of the same age. The upcoming days were all planned out, even busier than school. The fact that he could take the time to come see Komaeda Nagito was enough to prove how much he valued Komaeda Nagito. Dazai Osamu, though he spent a long time with Komaeda Nagito, Kudo Shinichi always seemed to see him talking with Reborn over at the Vongala side, or casually bump into him conversing with a familiar FBI agent during a visit to the hospital to check on his senpai. Besides, Dazai Osamu initially represented the Tei Corporation in dealings with Fitzgerald, which made Kudo Shinichi feel that of all the people traveling to America, the busiest one was definitely this corporate slug. Too much of a corporate slug, to the point where Kudo Shinichi began to see Dazai Osamu in a new light. After Kudo Shinichi left, Komaeda Nagito said to Dazai Osamu over dinner that evening, "Kudo-kun was really surprised that you are actually this busy. Mori-san eventually told me to give it a try, and that not giving it a try would waste his efforts." Dazai Osamu said absent-mindedly. It's impossible that he would work so hard for the Port Mafia, but Mori Ogai's request was so vague, and with such natural cover, if he didn't take the opportunity to seek some benefits for himself, wouldn't that be wasting a good chance? Finding amusement for himself was a habit for Dazai Osamu. After all, the world is so boring. While Komaeda Nagito was in a feverish state from his IV drip these past few days, Dazai Osamu, representing the Tei Corporation, finalized an agreement with Fitzgerald. After that, he informed Fitzgerald of the intel that he most desired to know. The legend says that there is a book that can turn everything written on it into reality. Dazai-Osamu said, "This legend is real." Fitzgerald waited for a moment. "That's it?" Dazai-Osamu gave him a, "What more do you expect? Look, the book is in Japan, that's it." Fitzgerald frowned deeply, muttering anxiously, "If I find out this information is false, I won't let you off." Although Dazai-Osamu's information was quite brief and vague, if it were true, this information would indeed be valuable. Fitzgerald even owed Dazai-Osamu a favor because of it. The original Fitzgerald merely thought about finding a way to cure his wife's mental illness, but now there is a new option. If he could get the book, he could bring his daughter back to life, and his wife would recover without any medicine needed. His family could return to a state of completeness, and with the book in hand, many things could become much simpler. Thus, Fitzgerald began investigating. Unexpectedly to Dazai-Osamu, Fitzgerald's investigation progressed extremely quickly, almost as if he had just cast the fishing net, and immediately someone was eyeing the net and starting to release the fish. Fitzgerald and Dazai-Osamu, in fact, could be considered as having formed a half-alliance, and when Dazai-Osamu negotiated with him, even though they were opponents, Fitzgerald couldn't help but admit that he truly appreciated this pesky little brat who came out of that narrow place, and so they shared a bit of intel. Dazai-Osamu didn't even bother to look at the intel, and simply said, "You got involved." Fitzgerald admitted, "That's right, and there are others keeping an eye on the book, wanting me to scout ahead." No matter how meticulous the plan was, the process by which Fitzgerald obtained the intel was roundabout, and it couldn't whitewash the fact that he had acquired such critical information in a very short time. This is clearly someone waiting for others to investigate relevant information and immediately release bait, also without concealing the exploitation of Fitzgerald. But it doesn't matter. Reuniting with his resurrected daughter and found the dawn of hope for treating his wife, Fitzgerald confidently said, "With so many people paying attention, this only serves to further demonstrate the authenticity and value of the book. As for that unknown mysterious person who gave me the intel and let me scout the way, it can be considered mutually beneficial. It's a pity, though, if I obtained the book, I would never give it to that sneaky guy." Dazai-Osamu shrugged, "Good luck to you, contact me when you need help. Right now, I'm more interested in the one hiding behind." This was a kind of intuition. Dazai-Osamu looked over the methods and processes Fitzgerald's guild used to gather intel, selecting a few things he found suspicious, intending to discuss with the FBI about a potential sweep operation to root out crime. They couldn't let Fitzgerald handle it, otherwise no one would be willing to accept his bounty in the future. But letting the FBI do it came with no burden. After all, that was their job, wasn't it? Dazai-Osamu directly sought out Akai Shuichi. After all, the FBI wasn't as sturdy as steel, and he had no interest in being too conspicuous. He was just an innocent tourist passing through Japan. Akai Shuichi understood his intentions, maintaining his stoic demeanor while silently cursing the FBI intelligence department for being as useless as always. Their intel network and efficiency couldn't even compare to someone visiting America for the first time from Japan. Thus, while Komaeda Nagi To lay bedridden for recovery, the FBI, with the intel provided by Dazai-Osamu, carried out several secret operations, drawing the attention of those pulling the strings from behind the scenes. Too sudden, although it's no longer useful, being dealt with by the FBI just like that is just too sudden, someone complained. "Fyodor, don't you feel like the FBI over there seems to be?" "Fyodor? What are you looking at?" The young man called Fyodor slowly stood up, holding a book in his hand. The title in Russian read, "Crime and Punishment." The person leaned in for a closer look. The author is Fyodor M. Dostoevsky. "The same name as you, Fyodor." Fyodor Dostoevsky's voice was very soft, "The same. Though it's common to have the same name, reaching this level is a bit too coincidental." The person hesitantly asked, "How is it?" Dostoevsky thought for a moment. "Enough to make me want to meet the author in person." Chapter 60 end.